In our Bantu tradition, we often hear about the broad and narrow paths, but what do they truly mean? Many believe the broad path is for the secular and the narrow path is for the religious, but this is an oversimplification. Today, we will break down the deeper meaning of these paths, revealing how they represent belief versus knowledge, conformity versus critical thinking. Stay with me as we explore why the narrow path is the journey toward true enlightenment and self-discovery. Mikhael Massa video. In our Bantu tradition and understanding, a common metaphor often discussed in religious and philosophical contexts is that of the broad path and the narrow path. Many believe that the broad path is the one followed by worldly, secular people, while the narrow path is reserved for those who live according to the teachings of their faith or divine principles. However, this interpretation may not fully capture the essence of these paths. The idea is often misunderstood because many assume that the broad path represents a life of ease, indulgence, and secularism, while the narrow path symbolizes a life of discipline, faith, and religious devotion, an oversimplification of their true meaning. In reality, the broad path is not exclusively for the non-religious or worldly. It is the route most traveled by the majority, including many who identify as religious, because it is the path of belief without questioning, the path of comfort and conformity where people accept what they are told, without seeking deeper understanding or evidence, making it an easy way to follow since it requires little effort, no critical thinking, no challenging of norms, and no stepping outside one's comfort zone. It is not inherently secular, but simply the path of least resistance, with many religious individuals adhering to dogma without questioning or seeking to understand the deeper truths of their faith, choosing belief because it is easier than the pursuit of knowledge. Conversely, the narrow path is the path of knowledge, critical thinking, and personal growth. It is where individuals strive to understand the world, question assumptions, and challenge their beliefs. A path that fewer choose to walk because it demands effort, courage, and a willingness to face discomfort. This path is not about blind faith, but about seeking truth even when it contradicts popular beliefs or societal norms. And those who walk it are often misunderstood, criticized, or even ostracized, especially when their pursuit of knowledge challenges established traditions or beliefs. To fully grasp the difference between these two paths, it is important to distinguish between belief and knowledge. Belief is based on acceptance without evidence, often rooted in tradition, culture, or authority, requiring no proof or understanding beyond faith, whereas knowledge is based on evidence, experience, and understanding, requiring questioning, research, and critical thinking, and is not easily acquired because it demands an active challenge of one's assumptions. Thus, while the broad path is dominated by belief, the narrow path is governed by the pursuit of knowledge, which is why the latter is more challenging. It requires stepping away from the comfort of unexamined beliefs and venturing into the unknown in search of truth. Walking the narrow path is not easy, as those who choose it often face societal pressure, criticism, and even isolation, with family, friends, and community members discouraging them from questioning established norms or seeking knowledge that contradicts popular beliefs, especially in religious communities where questioning dogma may be seen as a betrayal of faith. Nevertheless, despite its challenges, the narrow path ultimately leads to a deeper understanding of the world, a stronger sense of self, and a more meaningful life, freeing those who choose it from the limitations of blind conformity and allowing them the freedom to explore, learn, and grow. In the final analysis, the broad and narrow paths are not simply about secularism versus religion, but represent a contrast between conformity and critical thinking, belief and knowledge, and comfort and growth. The broad path is easy to follow but leads to unexamined beliefs and limited understanding, whereas the narrow path, though difficult, leads to deeper meaning, truth, and personal fulfillment. Ultimately, the choice between these paths is a personal one, yet for those who seek to truly understand the world and their place within it, the narrow path, the path of knowledge, is the one worth taking, for it is the path that leads to true freedom and enlightenment. In our tradition and understanding, the concept of tithing is often discussed in religious contexts, yet it is important to clarify that tithing is not a Bantu concept. It originates from foreign ideologies and has been integrated into many religious practices over time. Tithing is frequently presented as a spiritual obligation, a way to give back to God or support the church. But when examined closely, it functions more as a business model than a genuine spiritual practice. Often, the discussion of tithing is framed by a vision, a belief system that portrays tithing as a divine commandment or a pathway to blessings, based on faith rather than tangible evidence or historical tradition. However, the reality of tithing reveals it to be an ideology, a system of ideas that serves specific functions within a religious or economic framework. In practice, a person is encouraged to give 10% of their income to a religious institution as if it were a commandment from God, a notion reinforced through sermons, teachings, and community pressure, with the promise of receiving blessings, prosperity, or spiritual favor in return. In reality, however, tithing often benefits religious leaders or institutions more than the individual who gives their hard-earned money, creating a dynamic where the giver remains financially strained while the receiver accumulates wealth. Historically, tithing has been used as a tool for wealth accumulation by religious institutions and sometimes functions as a form of entrepreneurship for those who collect the tithes. While not all religious leaders misuse tithing, it is crucial to recognize its economic implications. In Bantu traditions, wealth was typically redistributed within the community through systems of mutual aid and collective responsibility, and the practice of tithing, as it is used today, diverges from these traditional values by creating a dependency on religious institutions and diverting resources away from community development. Rather than focusing on tithing, we should emphasize the importance of entrepreneurship and self-reliance in Bantu societies. Entrepreneurship is not solely about making money. It is about creating value, solving problems, and building sustainable communities. It allows individuals and communities to take control of their economic destinies by establishing their own businesses and industries, and successful entrepreneurs can reinvest their profits into community development by building schools, hospitals, and other necessary infrastructure. Moreover, by creating businesses that reflect our values and traditions, we preserve and promote Bantu culture in a globalized world where foreign influences often predominate. To move beyond the ideology of tithing, we must educate ourselves about its origins and implications, invest in entrepreneurship rather than giving money to institutions that may not directly benefit us, and build sustainable systems of mutual aid and collective responsibility that honor our traditional values. By doing so, we can create systems that empower us and our communities, moving beyond foreign ideologies and building a brighter future for Bantu people. In our tradition and understanding, the way we perceive the world is deeply influenced by our cultural background, environment, and experiences, a concept central to anthropology, the study of human societies and cultures. However, when we examine the worldviews of different peoples, especially from a Bantu perspective, we realize that these perspectives can be vastly different. A worldview is the way a person or a group sees and interprets the world, shaped by their collective memory, cultural practices, and social norms. For example, someone living in a city may have a very different worldview from someone living in a rural village, not just in terms of technology or lifestyle, but also in how they understand reality, relationships, and even everyday activities like eating or dancing. The collective memory of a society strongly influences individual behavior and interpretation. In many Bantu villages, communal activities such as dancing or eating together are seen as expressions of joy and unity, while in urban settings these same activities might be interpreted differently. A villager dancing in the city may view the laughter and applause as signs of enjoyment, whereas city dwellers might see the same laughter as ridicule. This disconnect occurs because the village worldview is rooted in a cultural context where laughter during a dance signifies happiness, contrasting with an urban perspective that may view the same act through a different lens. Consider dancing in the village versus the city. In a village, dancing is a communal activity that invites participation and expresses joy. But when this dance is brought to the city, the interpretation of laughter can vary significantly. Similarly, eating habits differ. Eating with hands is common and culturally accepted in rural areas, whereas urban settings often prefer utensils like forks and knives. Neither practice is wrong, they simply reflect different cultural norms. Daily routines also vary. Rural communities might rise early to tend to fields or livestock, while urban dwellers wake early to commute to work, each routine shaped by environmental needs and community structure. When we judge others based solely on our own worldview, we risk misunderstanding and misrepresenting their actions and intentions. European anthropologists who studied Bantu cultures, for instance, often interpreted Bantu practices through their own cultural lens, resulting in biased and inaccurate conclusions that labeled Bantu traditions as primitive or strange because they did not conform to European understandings. This underscores the importance of approaching other cultures with an open mind and a willingness to understand their unique worldviews. To truly appreciate a culture, one must study it within its own context, using its own tools and frameworks. For example, criticizing Bantu spiritual practices using the Bible, a tool from an entirely different cultural system, is not only unfair but also inaccurate. Each culture has its own logic and reasoning that must be respected. Moreover, the world is much larger than our immediate surroundings, defined by our family, friends, workplace, or social media, and every culture, community, and individual has a unique perspective shaped by their environment, history, and experiences. A person living in a wealthy urban area may have a vastly different understanding of the world compared to someone from a rural village or a poorer neighborhood. These differences encompass not just material wealth, but also values, priorities, and ways of life. To truly understand the world, it is essential to step outside our own cultural bubble and learn from others, not by abandoning our traditions, but by expanding our horizons and appreciating the diversity of human experience. In conclusion, the world is not a single uniform place, but a mosaic of diverse cultures, each with its own unique worldview. As Bantu, we must be cautious not to judge others based on our own cultural norms, while also resisting the biased interpretations of outsiders. By embracing our traditions and learning from others, we can develop a more nuanced and inclusive understanding of the world, celebrating the richness and complexity of our shared humanity.